It was July 2014, and Varna, Bulgaria's Black Sea coast, was bustling with vacationers. Lars Matank, a 28-year-old from Germany, was looking forward to a week of sun and fun with his friends. Lars was just another tourist who had come for the heat and pleasure, and he blended right in with the crowd of sunburned bodies. But even the most ordinary lives can take the darkest turns, sometimes without warning. Lars was an avid football fan, and it was the World Cup semifinals. Many other visitors who had traveled to Bulgaria's warmer regions to watch the sport on big-screen TVs in bars and pubs were also excited about it. The friends were having a good time on the beach on the fifth day of their vacation, before going to watch football and carry on drinking. Lars, a fan of Werder Bremen, made the hilarious decision to exchange the team's flags on their tables with a few Bayern Munich supporters. Some fans didn't take Lars's jokes too well, because football fans can be very passionate about the teams they root for. This resulted in a fight between Lars and the opposition fans, which was exacerbated by the fans' heavy alcohol consumption. After a while, the group went to a restaurant for dinner after leaving the pub, but Lars took a rain check and left the bar alone, going back to the hotel they were staying at. But things take a turn when that night Lars's friends don't find him at the hotel when they come back from dinner. They decide to wait for him, thinking he might have gone for a walk to cool his mind after the fight. But as the morning sun begins to rise in the horizon, all of the calls and messages to Lars go unanswered. His friends decide to go search for him. Later on, after they found Lars, he was in a terrible position, all beat up and injured. He said that a gang of guys had attacked him and severely beaten him, making it difficult for him to hear. Lars also reported having a jaw ache. When his friends asked him who attacked him, Lars said that the German tourist he'd been into a fight with inside the pub had set up the attack. His friends insisted that he goes to see a doctor, which he did at the local clinic. The doctor gave him a prescription for 500 milligrams of the antibiotic cefprozil. The doctor believed Lars needed inpatient care for his wounds. Much to his friends' worries, Lars couldn't fly home with them, as wished. The changes in the pressure during the flight could aggravate his condition. He was told that he should spend a few more days in Bulgaria and avoid any further exertion, so as to let his ear condition improve. Lars's friends insisted on staying with him till he recovered, but Lars insisted they return to Germany as planned on July 7th, downplaying his injury. But as they left, a shadow seemed to pass over him, a foreboding that his friends later couldn't shake. With this, Lars was left to fend for himself in the city of Bulgaria. Because the group had to leave the Viva Club hotel by midday that day, he lodged at the rather ordinary Hotel Color after checking out from Viva Club. This hotel was located in a more isolated area of the town. It was here, in the solitude of a hotel room, that Lars's behavior became increasingly paranoid and erratic, leaving everyone baffled. He called his mother Sandra in a state of panic, asking her to cancel his credit cards. He didn't give a proper explanation for this, but rather a vague response that he felt watched and unsafe in the hotel, and how he thinks his credentials will be stolen. His voice was thick, different from the composed and assertive man she had known him to be. The CCTV footage showed him wandering the hotel halls in an uneasy manner, ducking into doors, darting into elevators as if he were hiding from someone, and peering out the windows as if he were looking for someone. He had frequent calls with his mother, each in a state of urgency and panic, muttering constantly about unknown individuals who were allegedly tapping him, individuals who, according to him, had been paid to eliminate him. He appeared to be more scared with each call. Lars's mother, concerned about her son's anxious call, booked him a trip home for the next day. Lars departed the hotel once the phone call ended. There is no CCTV or witnesses to tell us where he went, but he returned an hour later and made another nervous call to his mother. The conversation was unusually quiet, with Lars dropping his voice and informing his mother that he needed to whisper in case the 4 guys following him heard what he said. During one chat, he asked her what was in cefprozil, the pills he'd been prescribed to assist his ear. It's possible that Lars was beginning to suspect that the drugs prescribed for his ear were producing paranoia, an unusual adverse effect. Could Lars have been developing paranoia due to sudden onset? Or was there someone, truly pursuing him? However, there was no answer. Several days later, Lars was convinced that he could not stay in Bulgaria any longer, or simply speaking, he wanted to go. He had to reach home. He took a flight and reached the Varna airport. This should have been the end of his predicament, going home, back to the familiar. But the airport only stood as the setting for the most terrifying part of his story. Upon reaching the airport, he called his mother to tell her he had reached safely, and for once, Lars seemed relieved. His mother told him to check in the airport hospital before boarding. Lars had no access to money because his mother had blocked his credit and debit cards, as per his request. So he requested that 500 euros be paid to him by Western Union. The two hung up the phone so that the funds could be sent, albeit it's unclear why Lars would want such a significant sum only to go home. While he waited for the money, he went to the airport doctor as his mother recommended. Dr. Costa Costow saw Lars and saw that he was agitated and fidgeting continuously, particularly with his hands. After having a closer look at Lars's ear, the doctor urged him not to travel for another week. He also offered him pain medicine to alleviate the aches, but Lars refused. Lars' appointment with the doctor lasted around 45 minutes when a construction worker entered the consulting room without knocking. This shocked Lars, who became much more disturbed than he already was. Lars sprang up from his seat and suddenly said, "I don't want to die here." Dr. Costow attempted to calm him down, explaining to the alarmed patient that the guy who entered the room worked at the airport and presented no threat to him. However, this did not settle Lars, and he fled the hospital clinic. When he dashed out of the office, he left behind his phone, ID, wallet, and credit cards. Lars was captured on CCTV rushing as quickly as he could through the airport, with other passengers pausing to gawk at the desperate guy fleeing from something. When vacationers attempted to figure out what Lars was running from, they were perplexed because there was nothing there. Lars hesitated for a few seconds before deciding where to run. He sprinted through the airport parking lot and climbed the 8-foot fence that surrounded it. The field full of sunflowers, each around 2 meters tall and in full bloom, was the drop beyond the gate. This meant that once Lars landed among them, he was no longer visible on the CCTV. In the meantime, his mother attempted to contact him to see if he had received the money she had deposited, but her calls went unanswered, and the deposited amount remained untouched. After some time, it became clear that something was off, and Lars's mother informed the German embassy that her son was missing. After calling the police, the CCTV trail directed them to Lars's last known location, in a sunflower field. Nothing indicated Lars had been there, despite a comprehensive search and the use of cadaver dogs. In an attempt to help in the hunt for her son, Lars's mother traveled to Bulgaria, but she was unable to pursue any leads. She remarked, "It feels like the earth ate him up." What was Lars running from? Was it a psychological breakdown, possibly triggered by his injury or medication? Or did he encounter something far more sinister, something that drove him to the brink of madness? Some have speculated that Lars fell victim to foul play, perhaps targeted by criminal elements in the city. Others believe his sudden paranoia could have been a side effect of the strong antibiotics he was prescribed, known to cause hallucinations in rare cases. But there's another possibility, one that's far more unsettling. What if Lars was indeed being followed? What if his fears, as irrational as they seemed, were rooted in a reality too horrifying to comprehend? It was the hot summertime of 1989 in Prince George, a city in British Columbia. A city surrounded by forest, and the weather was warm and rain seemed to be lurking. The couple, Doreen Ann Jack and her husband Ronald Ronnie, were 26 years old, struggling to make ends meet. They had two young sons, Russell's 9 and Ryan 4. They had an ordinary life with all the usual struggles that come with being a family of 4. They were close-knit despite the challenges, taking solace in one another's presence. The Jackses' struggle to provide for their children's needs and secure their future might be compared to those of the majority of modern families. Yet those dreams were about to be shattered in one of the worst ways possible. On August 1st, 1989, the Jack family got the biggest surprise of their lives when they got a call in the evening. One day, a man whose identity is still unknown to this day contacted Ronnie and offered him a job at a logging camp or ranch in the Klukul's Lake area, about 40 kilometers west of Prince George, past Bednesty. The couple rejoiced at this opportunity because they had been struggling to find a decent job and securing the future of their children. Doreen was offered a job as a cook's assistant in the camp kitchen, while Ronnie was offered a job bucking logs. The guy informed Ronnie that the couple's two boys, Ryan, age 4, and Russell, age 9, had daycare available at the camp. The man offered to transport the Jacks to the employment location that evening, as the couple didn't own a car. Out of sheer desperation to feed his family, Ronnie agreed, and prompted by him, the whole family decided to leave for the town the following morning. Ronnie contacted his brother at 11:16 p.m. to inform him about the camp job. He called his parents in Burns Lake, British Columbia, 2 hours later. But before ending the call, he said something that unsettled his mother. "Mom, if I don't come back, come looking for me." His words cast a dark shadow over what had been a cheerful moment. According to Ronnie, the family would stay at the location for 10 to 14 days and return home before the start of classes. The man bided his time until Ronnie, Doreen, Russell, and Ryan finished packing their stuff. On August 2nd, 1989, at 1:21 a.m., all 4 Jack family members were observed leaving their residence at 2116 Strathcona Avenue and hopping into the man's dark-colored 4-wheel drive pickup vehicle. They vanished from view forever. As for the details of what followed, much remains uncertain. The Jacks disappeared into the thin air. A confusion of heading to the wilderness swallowed the family. In the same way, days and weeks went by with no contact from those individuals, and that was when an alert was raised. Cops initiated an intense manhunt, beating the dust of the foreboding landscape of British Columbia in a desperate hunt for the missing family. But there was never a discovery made of any of their bones, any of their possessions, anything. It was as if the Jack family was wiped off the face of the earth. That was until January 28, 1996, at 8:33 a.m., when a bizarre phone call was received. According to the anonymous caller, the Jack family are buried in the south end of the ranch. The police were able to trace the call to a property in Vanderhoof, where there was a house party going on at the time. The caller remains unknown to this day, and this is the final clue to the disappearance. There is only one suspect in this case. Ronnie was last spotted with this man. The Caucasian man stood around 6'5" or 6'6" tall, with a thick beard and mustache. The man weighed between 200 and 275 pounds when he was 39 to 45 years old in 1985. He had reddish-brown hair and was observed wearing a baseball cap, red checkered work shirt, worn blue trousers, a nylon blue jacket, and work boots with fringe on the toes. The man who had called Ronnie was never tracked or ascertained as to his identity. Was he a legitimate employer, or was there something more malicious in his employment offer, as it were? That logging camp in which Ronnie was alleged to run off to could be traced nowhere. Some thought that the family had met its untimely death and that they were lured by a wolf into the so-called boonies. Some people thought that they would have perished in a car or truck accident in the desert. But without solid evidence, the best that can be said of this opinion is that they were speculations. Through the years, many hypotheses have already been presented. However, no reformulation has been given. The case of the missing Jack family is now among the most well-known cold cases in Canada, the story which has left a dark stamp on the community of Prince George. Was the job an evil trick just to bring the family over to their grave? Or were they in the right place at the wrong time and met an individual who intended harm on them? The questions remain even to date, raising more questions than answers. On August 23, 1912, in the Dunbars' home in Opelousas, Louisiana, was just another ordinary day. It was a summer morning for Percy and Leslie Dunbar and their 4-year-old son, Bobby, and had decided to go for an outing to Swayze Lake with their only child. It was a long, oppressive south day, with gnats whining and the water on the lake glowing in the sun. As the family laid down to rest by the side of the river, little Bobby wandered off into the forest. After a while, when the family did not see Bobby nearby, they started calling out his name, but received no response from Bobby. Bobby was gone. The disappearance of Bobby Dunbar called for the largest manhunt in the history of Louisiana. For weeks, hundreds of volunteers were sailing through the swamps, dragging the lake, and searching the place and the surroundings. The attempts to locate Bobby took over the whole life of the community, yet they were all unable to find him. He had become a phantom of the community. Summer changed into autumn, and still Leslie Dunbar did not lose hope. Her desperate pleas for her son's safe return echoed in the hearts of every mother who heard them. The Dunbars were noteworthy in the community, and as such, any sadness that befell them became the sadness of the community. But as hope began to wane, a new development would take the story in a shocking direction. 8 months later, in April of 1913, a new lead was found, stating that a boy of Bobby's appearance had been discovered in Mississippi, with a man by the name of William Walters. Walters said the boy was Bruce Anderson, a son of a woman who had left the child with Walters for safekeeping. But the Dunbars were quite sure that the boy was their Bobby, and the police immediately arrested Walters and brought the child back to Louisiana. When the boy was first introduced to Leslie and Percy Dunbar, their emotions were strong. Leslie claimed that the boy was her son, pointing to distinguishing signs, such as a mole on his neck and a scar on his foot. The town cheered Bobby's return, and the Dunbar family was finally reunited. However, not everyone was convinced. William Walters was taken to court for kidnap, and the case was as popular as could be. The prosecution portrayed Walters as a miscreant, a vagabond, and a fraudster, while Walters denied the charges, arguing that the boy in question was Bruce Anderson. To the audience's surprise, the woman whom Walters had presented as the boy's mother, Julia Anderson, testified that the child was, in fact, hers. But she was a poor, unmarried woman, and her testimony was dismissed. The case stirred unrest among the people, leading to the final trial, where Walter was found guilty of kidnapping. Rumors spread, and whispers of doubt began to grow. Was the boy really Bobby Dunbar? Or had the Dunbars, in their desperation, mistakenly claimed another woman's child as their own? As the years went on, the tale of Bobby Dunbar's kidnap became a legend in Louisiana, a tale that grew in the telling, each time with new ambiguities rather than new facts. The boy who went through life as Bobby Dunbar had a long and filled life, as he was convinced that he was Percy and Leslie's son, but many, even he, entertained at least momentary doubts that one voiced only in their thoughts. Bobby's granddaughter, Margaret Dunbar Cutright, started researching her family's past, only in the early 1990s. Her research took her to the Andersons, who had always suspected that the boy who was raised as Bobby Dunbar was in fact their son Bruce. Out of desperation to get at the truth, Margaret had to consult modern technology to help her. Bobby Dunbar, a young boy, went missing in 1900, and it took DNA tests in the year 2004 to reveal the actual incident. The test showed that the man who spent all his life under the identity of Bobby Dunbar was never, in one way or another, a Dunbar. The results astonished the Dunbar as well as the Anderson families, and left a lot of questions that would never be answered. Had the real Bobby Dunbar been left behind, and was his existence cardinally defined by deception, leaving his story inconclusive? And what has happened to Bruce Anderson, the boy who was stolen from his life and grows up as someone else? The tragic story of Bobby Dunbar still belongs to the most fascinating and mysterious cases of American history, which makes us doubt identity, memory, and truth.